X-Men 97 Season 2 is going to be the life and times of Apocalypse. The past is going to be the explanation of how Apocalypse became Apocalypse. The present is going to be Apocalypse as we know him, and it'll introduce his new 4 horsemen, one of which will be Gambit, and I've got an idea on who the other 3 will be. The future is going to create the stakes for Season 2. This is why we have to defeat Apocalypse, because if we don't, this is the future that awaits us. So, the first question to answer here is who or what time-displaced the X-Men. Now, this was not something that I had thought about until I had seen the comments in the previous video that I made, and a lot of you guys were saying that it was Bastion indirectly. When Cable body slides or time travels, it's using the device that's in his techno-organic arm. But that arm was ripped off by Bastion and then absorbed by Bastion, meaning Bastion possessed the time travel technology of Cable, and then he's destroyed. There's just this massive explosion of time. And the result is that the X-Men were scattered across the time stream and ended up where they are. Now, the reason why this makes such perfect sense is really one, of course, based on the fact that some of the X-Men are in the past, but also comes from Mother Ascani, because in the comics, as those of you guys who read comics know, that Mother Ascani is Rachel Summers, basically the daughter of Cyclops and Jean Grey from an alternate reality, Days of Future Past, time travel hijinks, she ends up in the future. Check out the last video if you want to know the details about that story. But if it really is like the comics, and Rachel pulled the minds of Cyclops and Jean into the future in order to help them raise Nathan, why doesn't she recognize them? Because when they encounter each other, Mother Ascani does not address them as Cyclops and Jean. She actually addresses them as sapiens from presumably some other territory around them. But let's focus on the past here. Let's talk about the origin of Apocalypse in terms of how it's going to play out in X-Men 97. Granted, I don't know the details, but broad strokes here, the X-Men are going to team up with En Sabah Nur to defeat Kang the Conqueror. Why do I say that? Because when Beast goes over the hill and he looks off into the distance, he sees the giant dome in what is clearly the capital city where the Pharaoh resides. What does that dome look like to you? Because to me, it looks like the orb from Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania, the one that Kang was holding that was basically the power core for his time travel or multiversal traveling device. Extrapolate that out in size and just turn it into a ship. It would make perfect sense. Not only that, in Marvel Comics, between the original appearance of Rama-Tut and the Rise of Apocalypse storyline, it was established that Kang had gone back into ancient Egypt, renamed himself Rama-Tut, and became Pharaoh. And he did this because, realizing how powerful Apocalypse would become, he wanted to take him and make him his heir, and then use Apocalypse to essentially take over or presumably even destroy the world. Now, ultimately, as we saw in Marvel Comics, the Fantastic Four traveled back in time, they defeated Rama-Tut, and at the same time, Apocalypse rose to power. And so what I think is going to happen is it's going to be revealed that the Pharaoh was a guy who just appeared one day. Think of like the arrival of the alien pretending to be a Pharaoh in the movie Stargate. And that's basically what you're going to see in X-Men 97. We're going to know it's Kang, his soldiers are going to have advanced technology, the X-Men are going to work alongside En Sabah Nur, and they're going to defeat Kang the Conqueror. But Apocalypse is going to end up harnessing that technology. Here's the kicker to this. In X-Men 97, there is an episode called Obsession. And this is an episode that largely deals with Warren Worthington after becoming the Archangel and then regaining his own mind and sanity and so on, trying to find a way to destroy Apocalypse. What the episode does is it establishes that Apocalypse has the level of power that he does because he came across a celestial ship. Now, the show does not specifically invoke the Celestials as the godly spacefaring race, but in Marvel Comics, they do. Now, I don't know if they're going to like invoke that whole plot point. It's a little complicated. It'd be a lot easier for them to say that what happens is that after the defeat of Rama-Tut and the X-Men are saved by Bishop and Forge and brought back to the present day, that Apocalypse ends up interacting with the technology of Kang, and then that's how he becomes the Apocalypse that we know. It'd be a great way to keep it just very simple, very concise, and tie it in to Kang the Conqueror, who we know is this threat kind of permeating throughout the multiverse saga, albeit handled very poorly by Marvel Studios. But then we go into the present day. Bishop and Forge saved the X-Men from the past, brought them back, and that's when the new four horsemen are introduced. Obviously, Gambit is going to be one of the horsemen. We know that from the mid-credit scene where Apocalypse picks up the Queen of Hearts and there's like, so much death. I didn't address that in the last video because, I mean, did we need it? Did it need to be pointed out? It's a weird thing. Gambit's death is just something everybody wants to see, and it happened in the comics, the Blood of Apocalypse storyline. We're going to get Wolverine as the Horseman War, but Storm controls the weather. What would happen if it just stopped raining in the world one day? You would get famine, the dying off of all these different crops. So it makes perfect sense that Storm controlling the weather would live up to that namesake metaphorically. But Morph becoming Pestilence would be dope as well. Being able to not only tap into people's powers, but then take their powers away. That would be really, really cool. I don't know if it's going to play out that way, but it would be interesting. But then the future, that's the stakes. That's the kicker, because that's going to establish the Age of Apocalypse. It'll be the Age of Apocalypse in name only, so it won't be the alternate reality story where he seizes control. But at the end of the day, there wasn't really any differentiation between the time period in the future that Cable comes from, where Apocalypse controls everything, and the Age of Apocalypse story. The only real differences were the causes of those two futures and the differing rosters of the X-Men as we knew them and the characters who were involved. That's it. The core basis behind those two stories is that Apocalypse rules the world. Technically, in the Age of Apocalypse, he ruled North America and not the whole world, but for the person living in Kansas, there might as well not be a difference. Now, how that future unfolds and how that whole situation plays out, I don't entirely know. I imagine that Cable will warn them of what's happening, and Cyclops and Jean will come back and verify Cable's statements, right? With their arrival, it'll be, yes, we have to defeat him. If we do not defeat or destroy Apocalypse, this is how it ends. It's game over. He always comes back and he rules everything. I also imagine that what the future will do is it'll provide an explanation between the ending of Beyond Good and Evil, that 4-part episode story arc from X-Men the Animated Series, and how Apocalypse would presumably come back and conquer everything. Yes, technically he came back in season 5 as a spiritual entity and took over the body of some poor sap, I don't remember who it was, but season 5 of X-Men the Animated Series was trash, so we can ignore that and pretend it never existed. But with that being said, guys, let me know what you think about this theory down in the comments section. Poke holes in it, which I know you're gonna do. Rob has a theory? Time to stomp all over it. Let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.